Welcome to the Big Fat Gay Podcast, where we talk about things that are weighing on our minds. I am Trevor Christmas Keyson, and I am on the good list this year because I couldn't go anywhere to do anything naughty.
Well, I am Michael. I'm Michael Chrismica Willer because I am half Christian, half Jewish. I'm actually neither of those, but that's how I grew up. And I had to stay home this year, but I've been up to plenty of naughty things. I don't know where you've been. But
that explains those Santa's weird calluses I've been seeing. My name is Donica Marshall. I am a big chubby guy living in sunny Hollywood, and I want gingerbread. That's all.
Oh, that's a fair request.
My name is Dan Uliverio, and I'm a chubby chaser and author, public speaker. And yay, it's all Yuli here. We have our nice little tree and our nice chilly weather with blazing sunshine because it is Los Angeles.
Because of course it is. Merry Christmas, everybody, and Happy Hanukkah. And we're coming up in the end of 2020, and I'm sure that's more exciting than any of these other things.
Yeah.
And the end is in sight.
I mean, from what I've heard from the government, 2020 is kind of continued until like fall of
2021
next year.
No. Well, I, for one, am looking forward to having some time off and trying to forget through much eggnog drinking, boozy eggnog drinking, about everything that happened this year.
Though by the same token, I feel like it's appropriate that we're actually watching the vaccines rolling out as we're getting ready for Christmas.
Santa's bringing vaccines.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else saw the story about Santa and Mrs. Claus infecting a bunch of kids with COVID at a mall.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
That's amazing.
People, you can't share your cookies and milk.
I'm sorry, but like at this rate, if you're freaking sending your kids to sit on a COVID Santa's lap, that's on you.
It's a season of giving, including giving COVID.
Yes.
That's just how it goes.
Let's.
On that note, I heard a little bit of good news in the news this week. Fauci has announced that Santa is in fact immune. The real Santa is immune to COVID. So Santa will be making his regular rounds this year.
Oh, thank God.
Yes, it was concerning. Especially because Santa's an anti-masker, so the fact that he's immune is
that really
that's actually a myth. He has his elves weave his beard together over his mouth. And him being Santa, it has antibacterial properties. It's very effective.
And does Hanukkah Harry have this problem?
No, of course not. Hanukkah Harry's been sterilized since birth by his parents. That's just how Jewish parents roll.
Because they've been circumspect.
Wow.
It's bad. It's a dark time.
So Dan, how does it
everybody.
feel to be on your last episode? I mean,
It's fine.
Well, let's get right on into it. And it's not Christmas without mail from
yeah. Letters to Santa or the Big Fat Gay Podcast,
yes.
Whichever you can get to.
Exactly.
Roll that beautiful mailbag music.
So last week we reached out to a bunch of chasers and got some really awesome responses, and the episode went very long and we didn't get to everybody who actually wrote in. So we wanted to we have a couple more. And the first guy, we had two people to get to. One is sort of the traditional chaser experience, and he has a unique perspective that I can't wait to get to. The other was a Chub for Chub writer who has a totally unique perspective that we haven't talked about yet. And I think we're gonna save that one for next week. We want because it's gonna be a lot, and I think that we can have a really good discussion around it.
A lot in a good way.
Yeah, it's a lot in a good way, and I think that we don't want to shortchange you by trying to cram it into this episode. So to get right to it, growing up chaser, our chaser fellow writes, when I started to develop sexually, I realized not only was I gay, I was attracted to chubby and usually older guys. Thus, I spent a lot of my youth wishing there was someone my age that I could be attracted to, and hopefully that person would be gay. But ultimately feeling like I'd be fantasizing about the teacher or football coach until I was 18 and went off to college. I felt slighted because I couldn't embrace my romantic side the way that my peers could. And when I finally did come out as a chaser to my close friends, they didn't really get it. I'm almost 30 now, and anytime I start to feel nostalgic about my teenage years, I also remember how trapped I felt and how misunderstood I was, just waiting to grow up. And that's something I still don't know how to address. And that's where he ends. And I just want to say right off the bat, that is so relatable. I could have written that myself, like word for word. The idea that you are, I mean, I think there's the added element of being attracted to older guys, which is not necessarily always the chaser experience. Although I think there is a pretty universal gay experience in there, that a lot of gay teenagers are attracted to older guys, but particularly the like waiting to grow up or waiting to grow older so that you could start to get to a place where your age was a little closer to the age of the people that you were interested in. That's been a journey that I have gone through. I mean, starting off when I was in my late teens, dating almost exclusively 15 to 20 years older, sometimes 25. Like that was, I think, something that I pretty much just ignored and just went for it because it's what I wanted. But at the same time, if you don't take a step back and try and find an introspective stance and a way to sort of embrace yourself and love yourself and accept that that's okay, especially if you're not getting that support from the people around you, it can feel like, like you're in this dark tunnel with no end in sight. And I'm not much older than the person who wrote in. I just turned 30 this year. So I think the best advice I can give you is don't try to grow up too fast if you can help it. Like I felt pretty much from my mid-teens until recently, I had to try and be and appear and act as old as possible so that I could fit in amongst the people that I was attracted to, and also so that the people that knew me wouldn't question whether or not I belonged in that circle or around that company. And it just felt like this pressure to be older and look older, and that can really trip you up in a lot of ways.
Can I just ask?
So enjoy where you're at.
Can I just ask what's an example of how you might look or try to be older?
Well, for instance, when I got my first professional full-time job when I was 25, I was dating a guy who was a little bit older. I think he was 9 years older than I was. And my perception of myself was this sort of young 20s guy. I had just moved to LA, and everyone had this pressure on me to be like the hot young twink thing and wear tight-fitting clothes and do that whole thing. And I rebelled against that. I hated that. I wanted to be taken more seriously and appear more mature. And so I went out, as I got this job, I went out and bought like a whole new wardrobe of basically what I thought were like grown-up clothes, in quotes, like slacks, nice leather shoes, like vests and button-down shirts, and just, basically like professional office setting clothes. But really it was so that I could feel like it was almost an imposter syndrome thing. Like I felt like I was too young, and so that I had to kind of project this age out into the world, and buying a whole new wardrobe was one of the ways that I did it. And I don't wear those clothes anymore, by the way.
Well, is that because you feel, because there's kind of two things here. There is, as you say, a lot of gay men in their teens look up to older men, either as mentors or even as sexual fantasies or even partners. And then there's the chub chaser thing, which we've talked a lot about. The question sometimes is whether you find, like, if you're 16 years old and you're just gaga over the coach or the English teacher who's in his 30s, and you find yourself consistently attracted to people in their 30s, and that's something you have as a 16-year-old. And then the thing to look at is, does that remain? Like when you're in your 30s, are you still attracted to people in their 30s? Or now that you're in your 30s, do you look at people who are in their 50s and 60s, which can be something else, which is like you're always looking for older, and it kind of follows you. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a difference between whether you're attracted to this particular kind of older icon who is 30 something, or whether it's actually something that follows you and grows up with you.
Yeah, I think that's a really clear difference, because for me, it has shifted as I've gotten older. And I think, Trevor, you and I have also talked about this too, the idea that being with and around people my own age really didn't appeal that much, because I felt like I didn't belong amongst them, and I felt like they were somehow, I don't know, like immature or kind of, I don't know, flaky or just like not relating to my own generation.
Trevor's told me that about himself too. Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, I've definitely felt that with kind of, people my age, but then I think with dating and like chasers, I have always kind of gravitated towards older guys. But part of that for me, kind of within the chub chaser world, is I feel like older guys tend to have their shit together and they've worked through some of those issues that younger guys necessarily, might not necessarily have done.
I think that's definitely true because, if you're fat from birth or almost, you have a lot of tactics. You have a lot of experience dealing with fat phobia and fat oppression. And you by the time you're 16, you know how this game goes. On the other hand, if you're a chubby chaser, you haven't dealt with that. And when the sex train does hit you in adolescence at about 16 or 13 or whatever, and you have no experience dealing with fat phobia or fat oppression, even though it does affect you indirectly. And so what happens is because chasers can pass, I think we're also handicapped in our development, which is why it takes us longer to get our shit together.
Yeah.
Something you said there made me curious. Like, Dan, Michael, did either of you have any preconceptions about what life was for a fat guy that proved to be completely off? Or
well, it's different for me because I was a fat kid, so I think that's also helped me as a chaser, that I have an instinctual appreciation of what that's like. But I don't know, Michael.
That's an interesting question. I think I've certainly learned a lot. Like there's a lot of stuff that I never thought about that I did learn eventually just from dating and being around fat guys. So as far as assumptions, I think I listened. Like, I don't think I tried to make too many assumptions. I think I just tried to pay attention to the people I was around to see what they needed, whether or not they were saying it out loud. And I think that was more valuable than trying to make an assessment on my own.
That's really key because the whole listening thing, like I talk a lot about that. And whether you're a chaser, whether you're an encourager, anything like that, it's really when dates go bad and the chaser's being a jerk, it's almost always because the chaser has this fantasy that is not lining up with the human being in front of him. Mm-hmm. And if you just are present to who you're with, and Michael has very adeptly called that listening. If you just listen and get your dick out of the way, you will have a great date and a great experience with a great guy. And, it's not to say that chubs don't do this too, but I think it's even more common with chasers because there is that sense. I think, Don, you talked about this in the last episode where like, okay, we're in the bedroom, and you hear the starter pistol and you're off to the races. And all of a sudden it's just this, what's going on? What? Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. And it's disconnected from the rest of the date, if I understood you correctly.
I have the first guy I ever really enjoyed being with was also the first guy who was capable of still being himself enough in the bedroom where he could laugh and be goofy in the bedroom.
Oh, right?
Right?
God, yes. God, that was great.
But the majority of people I know, when it's bedroom time, they get super serious. I'm like, what we're doing here fundamentally and objectively is kind of silly. Like it's sort of funny and it's goofy and like, just freaking enjoy it. This is not freaking War and Peace we're writing.
I wonder how much of that comes from porn. I recently listened to a series. I subscribed to the series of lectures about sex education, and one of the things that they were talking about is talking about porn with young people. Now, they don't show porn to the high schoolers, but they definitely kind of take it for granted that most high schoolers have seen or at least heard about porn. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that performative aspect that you're talking about, Don, is from people watching porn or watching even just like, sexy movies where like it is such a staged and performative event that people forget to be themselves.
I also wonder if another aspect could be just basic insecurity. Like if you aren't secure in your own attractions, then you might find that you have to take it really seriously, because to be able to laugh at yourself or to be able to laugh at the situation, if something slips or whatever, and it's a little goofy, and to be able to do that, you have to be very secure in what's happening generally. And if you're not there, then it might feel like you have to, it might feel like such a serious prospect because you're trying really hard because you don't have that confidence.
Look, if I'm choosing to spend some time in the bedroom with you, it's because I like you, right? If you become someone else in the bedroom, that's defeating the entire purpose. I actually had a weird experience with a guy who I think he had what's the best way to put this? Porn face, I guess.
Yes.
He had a performance face that unfortunately was actually rather bad. It kind of looked like he was about to eat me, in a really bad way.
Man.
I wasn't with him long enough to broach the topic, but it was that was wildly uncomfortable. I'm like, have I just invited Jeffrey Dahmer into my home? This is a bad
Oh dear.
Well, maybe to summarize or to wrap up for our Chaser listener, for me, and I don't know if this is your journey, but for me, it just took a little bit of time, and you're almost 30 now. My tastes and my attractions broadened as I got older, particularly when we talk about age. So as I got older, somebody my age became much, much more appealing. And I think part of it was just my own journey and my own acceptance and my own growth as a person, but also the idea that, if somebody who's 20 and lives like they're 20 is not appealing to you, well, somebody who's 30 is going to be very, very different from that. And they don't necessarily have to be 50 or 80. But as Dan was saying before, there's also a different thing where that really is as almost as much as being a chaser and interested in fat. Like the older aspect is also that key element. So there's kind of two things we're talking about, and depending on which side of the fence you're on, that may or may not be helpful.
Mm-hmm. So just a quick follow-up on this, guys, listening to reading the emails from all of these chasers has been very eye-opening. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners have been very grateful to hear some chaser experiences, because we don't get to hear that very often, right? Mm-hmm. As we've covered in the past, it's not something that's covered in mainstream culture. And I've met plenty of chubby guys who kind of doubt the chasers exist. So it's nice to hear these things from time to time. So I would just like to take the time to encourage our chaser listeners to take a special moment to write in. We will share we will share what you write anonymously, unless you exclaim that we should do otherwise. We've talked before about ways that chasers can support the chubs they love, and letting us know you exist, and sharing what it's like for you with us. It's a good way to start.
Should we just call it the I Exist segment? Just literally, if that's all you want to write, we'll just remind people, hey, there's another chaser out there.
Well, it's so funny because it sounds ridiculous to the chubs, but there are really chasers out there who go, where are all the chubs for me to date? And the chubs are looking at each other like, are you fucking kidding me?
I kind of themed pop culture this week around the concept of a naughty list. Because there were two stories that kind of vibed well together, but are also kind of like, come on, guys. Like disappointed middle school teacher trying to get through to the kids.
We can do better than this.
Yeah. So the first is it's from Refinery 29, and it's kind of about it's called Lockdown Loungewear and Double Standards for Plus Size People.
Oh God, yes. Even outside of lockdown.
Yes, but I think obviously during lockdown we are trying to be more comfortable, and there has been a huge boom in just loungewear stuff, and very kind of drapey, comfy clothing, which the article kind of goes into the double standard that like fat people aren't allowed to wear clothes like that because then they're seen as slobby or unkempt. And I think it's interesting because it's also there's been in this boom of loungewear a lot of very like oversized clothing, which shows these companies can make clothes for fat people as long as they're for thin people.
Right.
Which, speaking of, I'm wearing I was going to do this as like a whole thing on the podcast, but I have my Comfy, which is one of these like big, I think it's a big gift for 2020. And the concept is it's an oversized hooded sweatshirt, which is basically a men's 5XL sweatshirt, but for thin people. And, it fits anyone. And like, it doesn't
anyone
fit
if you're
me.
under 5X.
Yeah. This, it is they managed to start with something that would almost fit me and then alter it in ways because it's for, tiny people.
Mm-hmm.
I was expecting this big drapey, experience. I'm like, no, it doesn't cover my belly.
The point of the article, though, comes back to
Yes.
Yes.
the double standard that
Yes.
we all know. If you're lounging around, right, wearing oversized baggy things, it's comfortable. There's something warming about it. It's freeing to the body. Most of us enjoy it, but it's something that for some reason, if a fat person does it, it's because you're lazy.
Yes.
Right?
Mhm.
And that's really frustrating. I'll be like, everyone likes it. Every single t-shirt I have ever loaned to a female friend that was wet and needed something to cover has never come back home. They have always kept every shirt I have loaned to everyone.
Because it's so big and comfy, Don, like you.
Yep. And it's it's just a sucky double standard, especially when we're all just trapped at home and I don't want to think about how I look. I just want to be comfortable.
So loungewear, you're on the naughty list.
Yeah.
The other thing, actually, Dan pointed out to me, store accused of fat shaming for calling large size women's clothing rotten.
Oh, this was amazing. So this is a store. I think in Hong Kong, but there's also a Taiwan tie-in. But anyway, they decided it would be just so cool to get rid of sizing by small, medium, large, extra large for this women's clothing line and invest in like, do you remember the sizing, Trevor? Okay, so read it.
Sorry, just like, it's so bad. Slim, beautiful, rotten, extra rotten, and rotten to the core.
And obviously these are translations from, I suspect, Mandarin, but it's still horrible. But here's the good news. Even in China, which has really no shame about fat shaming, these people were shamed. And I like that the people who shop there were like, hey, that's not okay. So it's a triumph, kind of. The people were upset because that's a triumph,
I have to say, I feel like there is a market for this sizing, but it's like, if this were like, a radical fatty with like a goth or punk clothing line.
Oh yeah.
These sizings could work.
The lesson here is just know your audience.
Yeah.
Well, we all know what this means.
I think the new one size fits all should be rotten to the core. Well, so in the tradition of Victorian Christmas tales that are both spooky and kind of a bummer, we have a special Yuletide Lizzo watch, which maybe it's a Lizzo carol this week. So Lizzo watch music, but with some sleigh bells.
Yes.
Okay, so I need to set this up with it's been a kind of rough period for Lizzo. So naturally, it gets worse because it's 2020. And
of course,
Lizzo made an Instagram post earlier this week that kind of blew up. And it was, Lizzo did a detox, and she did kind of these 2 montage videos discussing the detox and kind of showing, it was like progressive, kind of like a before and after thing, talking about the detox and why she was doing it. Because she said, November was stressful. She was in Mexico. She ate a lot of bad food and she was having some like gastro issues. But it received, everyone blew up about it. And it got framed as people attacking Lizzo, which I think it was people not attacking Lizzo, but people attacking kind of detox culture, because in 2018, there was this big blow up of like hardcore advertising of detox teas or flat tummy teas on Instagram from like every single influencer. And that is kind of what really, I think, brought a lot of people into body positivity, which now has spun out.
Well, I think the way to say that is it's what changed body positivity into, oh, look, you can get thin and be positive about your body.
Yes. And now that, and Lizzo, in sharing her experience, tagged the person who she's been working with for this detox. And when you click on it, her page is Fast Weight Loss with JJ Smith. And she does kind of promote these detoxing products, but it is all kind of framed through weight loss and losing belly fat and all these before and after pictures.
And that's the real disconnect for me here, because Lizzo goes out of her way to say that, you know, I wanted to do something healthy. And so I did this thing. And she said, I wanted to talk about it because so often we look at fat people doing something healthy, and then we take the extra step of saying, oh, so they must be trying to lose weight. And she made the point of saying, I wasn't trying to lose weight. I was trying to do something healthy. And then the disconnect is she links to this product that she's using and the person who created it. And it's all about weight loss through detoxing. It deliberately conflates the two. And so that's the sliminess in the background. You can decide how much you want to attach that to Lizzo, but that's where it kind of falls apart for me.
And no, I totally get what she's saying with that. I mentioned that I did the Master Cleanse detox for 2 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. This was like 5, 6, 7 years ago. And it was not to lose weight. It was purely scientific curiosity on if I could physically do it, what it would make me feel like. I was curious, and I'm not going to avoid something I'm curious about because, oh no, people are going to think I'm dieting with this thing, which is not a diet. It's not done for weight loss. So
unless it is, unless someone goes in with that intent. Oh, well, I guess I'll lose weight.
You can go in with that intent, but that diet is not intended for that. So,
well, and it brings up the whole point of, there's no scientific studies that support that detoxing does anything close to detoxing. In fact, you could argue that it puts more stress on the body when you're trying to. So that's a whole other conversation. I'm not going to tell people what to eat or not eat.
Yeah. Detoxing is a marketing talk anyway. There's no such thing as detoxing.
And Lizzo's response to this was so generous, so much more than she needed to do in the midst of kind of being at the center of something that she didn't ask for. She said this before. I mean, she said what really kind of, I feel like Lizzo Watch for me personally has been kind of gotten weird since she has kind of been in this dark place and talking about it on the David Letterman Netflix show, and kind of, she has reluctantly become the voice of fat activism, body positivity, whatever you want to call it, because she is out there and not apologizing for her body.
Yeah.
Right. And people's projections of what they think or feel she should or shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
Which is, it always comes back to that, whether or not you feel like you're supporting Lizzo or not. If you're holding her up to be this icon, that's what she was talking about to David Letterman, is that she didn't ask for that. Like, she wasn't intending to be that, and she just sort of fell into it, and it adds all of this sort of outside pressure to suddenly represent yourself in a very specific way.
And I think also it says a lot that she, is uncomfortable with it and now is being vocal about it, but continuing to still stay in this role. And I've talked with a lot of people kind of in the stratosphere about it, and just the generosity and patience with handling all of this is, more than anyone deserves.
Well, can you just imagine if you're a pop star, if what you do is you make music and you make joy, and how much of what's written about her has nothing to do with that?
Mm-hmm. And we have seen this before. I'm reminded of the whole Ellen experience back in the 90s, where she became the very reluctant spokesperson for all things LGBT. That was never what her work was about.
It is now.
Ever. She was the most family-friendly, innocuous comic that just avoided sexuality in general. But as soon as she got outed, if she didn't make a lesbian joke every half hour, then people felt let down by her.
Yeah, I don't know. It's Merry Christmas, Lizzo. Merry Christmas, everyone. God bless us all.
Yeah.
Everyone.
And yes, everyone. Merry Christmas, Lizzo.
Which seems like a great way to pivot to our main topic.
Yes. And what is Christmas
Merry
about?
Christmas, everyone.
I think either Dan or Michael maybe should. I think Dan, just because Dan is very performative. He has his theater background. He can use.
Reading the...
Oh, you want me to read it? Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
To introduce our subject for the day.
Okay. So let's see if you can guess our subject for the day based on this reading. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a berry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump on the pipe he held in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself.
It's Santa.
Santa.
And of course,
We all love
that is the
Santa.
poem "A Visit from St. Nick" by Clement Clark Moran. But it was written in 1823. And the reason we start with that is because we kind of want to get this idea of Santa. He's an icon for many chasers. And we thought we'd go back to the beginning of how Santa is envisioned before all the modern takes on him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We want to do a deep dive into Santa, as it were.
Now, Michael's been there.
Yeah.
Gonna come right on
I'll
down
tell you
his
all about
chimney.
Well, and again, it's funny because with our audience, there's going to be maybe three types of people in our audience. There's going to be guys who see a little bit of themselves in Santa, whether because of the size or whatever. There are going to be the guys who know who Santa is and appreciate him. And then there are going to be the audience members that want to bang the hell out of Santa.
Yep, those are the three.
We may be the only podcast in existence that will have to deal with the fuckability of Santa in our podcast, which is an interesting place to be. For me, Santa is an interesting icon, right? Because one of the things we've gone into in the past so much is the way fat people are represented in media. And if you think about it in general, Santa Claus is the one fat icon that is always portrayed in the most positive light you can imagine. Although he is fat, his fat is presented as a wonderful thing, a plush thing, a symbol of opulence and comfort and joy, right?
Right.
He is not portrayed as stupid. Santa is not stupid. He's not portrayed as selfish or cruel. He has every positive trait you could hope for representation, and he's the only fat character that can say that.
That's pretty
Yeah, I
true.
think that's, yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
I'd say
for
that's
me,
accurate.
that felt important. Like there is somewhere once a year where I can see a representation of myself in some small way that is not being denigrated.
And no matter how
Right.
fat he is, he fits down a chimney.
Yep. There's no
the-
doubt that he can do his job because of his weight.
Yeah, that's what it
know?
is. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So for me, as a fat man, Santa's actually a refreshing breather moment, right? Where I can see that icon and know that no one's going to be defacing him or mocking him in general. Although some people, we'll get into that later. But
Well, and his weight, I was going to say for chasers, is why he's held up as an object of desire for a lot of chasers. Now, it is not at all to say that every chaser is into Santa Claus. Far from it. But there are chasers for whom Santa is it. Like that is, they are looking, and we talked about older versus younger. I've met chasers in their early 20s. Their whole fantasy is to be with a white, bearded, fat, 60-year-old guy who looks like Santa.
Right. And then so this is kind of where we came to the poem and like what is now the modern view of Santa, sort of the rosy eyes, chubby cheeks, big belly, and like because Santa has been visually represented in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And my curiosity is like, okay, so you have a chaser who's interested in Santa, but which Santa? Because there are they will describe him differently. Like this is where we talk about chasers are like, you can't just say, oh, you like fat guys, right? Well, no, I like this kind of fat guy most. And like, there's a spectrum. And so the way that a chaser describes what he likes in Santa, that could skew towards the bear world more than anything.
I would
depending
actually
on-
go out and say that when you look at the way Santa is represented by different artists, it's not just chasers. That is the most positive form that these artists can conceive of a fat body, right?
Which form?
So any artist
Which
drawing
form?
Santa.
Oh, yeah, I see.
So-
if they want to make fat positive, they make him Santa. Is that
Yeah.
what you mean?
So
Okay.
by looking at the way they draw Santa, do they draw him as sort of a big bearish guy? Do they emphasize the roundness? Is he pretty straight and lean for Santa? There are certain people who do sort of a barely chubby Santa in their imagery. But it's a way to kind of look into people's mind who don't think of the body as sexualized. But in that moment, they're trying to find the beauty in a body that they don't often draw in any kind or appreciative way. So how do they represent it? I think it tells something about them, which I think is interesting.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I also think there's a component there if they're not treating Santa as a sexual object. I can't imagine why. But there's that idea. I think there's also, Dom, the idea of like, how can we make this fat character acceptable to present? And so in the same way that like, it reminds me of Tim Gunn when he was dealing with like a fat model or clothes for fat people, he would talk about hiding and concealing and making something a little less noticeable, and which is just hateful. But the same thing, I think, with a lot of artists who are rendering Santa, it's like, well, he's got big rosy cheeks. They just happen to be fat. And we're never going to show him, unless it's erotica, we're always going to show him with as much clothing as possible, so that it's not about the body.
That's exactly where I was going with it, was the idea that, yes, Santa is very much held up as this, overwhelmingly positive figure, but he's also completely desexualized. Like,
that is true.
you kind of, Dan brought this up last couple weeks ago when we were talking about Godmothered. In that case, I think it makes sense, but just the idea that a lot of fat characters are very desexualized. In fact, probably most fat characters. And I think that 100% applies to Santa, except for, the chasers out there.
Well, and I mean, if you're screaming in your head, it's like, well, of course he's desexualized. He's a child's icon and he's an old man. And but if you put him together with Mrs. Claus, which is frequently done, Mrs. Claus makes appearances variously and often. Mm-hmm. There's still, you barely get a peck on the cheek. It's very much, Lucy and Ricky sleep in separate beds. Well, here's how I would say, because obviously the initial context for Santa doesn't need any kind of sexualization. But if you were to get a mainstream, like out in the world, pop culture, mainstream representation of a quote unquote sexy Santa, would he still be fat?
I don't think so.
And every sexy Santa I've ever seen, I shouldn't say ever seen, but yeah, they're usually hot young guys in their 20s with abs wearing a Santa cap. That's the traditional that's the sexualized Santa.
So I just brought up some images by Norman Rockwell. It looks like it's Santa relaxing in a gigantic onesie.
With the red underwear. Flap?
Yeah, it's like red underwear, and he's got it looks like he just ate a big meal, and he's got a napkin sort of draped over his crotch, and he's looking exhausted. Really? And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll share it.
I think that's called his lap, Don, his lap.
Here's my question, though. And this is going into like definitions, and everybody hates definitions, but they're what we've got. That picture that you're looking at, the Norman Rockwell painting, is that a chub? Is that a bear? Is that a daddy? Is it a combination of all three?
It's whatever you're bringing to it, because it's all of those.
Yeah, I would agree.
If you're into chubs, that's a chub. If you're into bears, that's a bear. If you're into daddies, that's a daddy.
It's like the rabbit and the duck.
The optical illusion?
Yes, there's an optical illusion where it's from when you look at it one way, it looks like a rabbit. The other way you look at it, it's a duck. And I think there's actually a term for this type of optical illusion, which someone is probably screaming in their car, because that's how I imagine most of this podcast goes. But I think it's one of those things, like I kind of feel like I am a rabbit or a duck, because guys either see me as like, smooth cherubic, or like I am this bear, this like scratch my chest bear.
Well, because you're far from smooth, but you're like the teddy bear cherub. And so it's just a marketing thing for you if you want to market yourself to the people who are gravitating to the cherubic chubs or the hairy bears.
So does Santa promote obesity? Discuss.
No. Worst transition ever.
No. And then our balloon landed in a magical land called fat phobia.
This is the thing of like, I feel like you can just point at anything and be like, that promotes obesity. That dog, look at that dog. It's eating some food. That couch
promotes obesity. People sit on it, do nothing.
What it comes down to is, and the reason why I bring it up is because there was several people have basically claimed that Santa is a bad role model because he's fat. Right. There was a study that came out of Melbourne that kind of made that point in 2009. There's a bunch of people that picked that up and ran with it. There are a lot. If you do a search for is Santa a good role model online, you're going to get a huge number of hits that are saying he doesn't watch what he eats, he's fat, and he drinks alcohol. And some will point out that he smokes, but that's getting less and less.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned in our very first episode that pissed me the fuck off.
Yeah.
This is a person who spends once a year in an eternal, never-ending hell delivering toys to your children to make them smile, and you think he's a bad person because he's fat. Fuck you.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I really love your way of encapsulating that. And you're like, no matter what he does, he's bad because he's fat.
He's literally the icon of generosity and good spirit in the darkest time of the year, but he can't do that and be fat.
Yeah.
Do you know how long Santa has to wait in line to get those PlayStation 5s this year?
Someone calculated how many years it would take for someone to complete a trip all the way across the globe, delivering presents to every single house in existence. And it was something like hundreds of years in one night. Yeah.
It reminds me, way back in the dark times, in a different time, when I was leading another life, I was hired by a little company called The Learning Company. And they were famous for making really high-end educational software for kids. And I was working on a completely different project. I was working on something for their high school market, but my partner at the time was supervising a project they were doing for little kids. And it was like counting games and shape identifying games. And if you know educational software, you know that built into the learning part, it's framed as a game, and games have a reward when you win. Mm-hmm. And the way it had been designed is that if you win this particular round, you get an ice cream cone. And if you win it again, you get 2 ice cream cones. And the educational consultants say, no, you can't do that. You can't promote eating ice cream as a reward. And so they redesigned the reward system so that it was like, you get to read more books.
What?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was this idea of the food police and how are kids going to take this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not even going to argue with whether you should use ice cream as a reward. That's not the point. But my point is, like, it is just so baked into everything we do. Yeah. When we talk about kids, we talk about diet culture.
Do people want us to be like, you get a cup of tea that makes you shit yourself?
Yeah.
Would that make people happy?
Tea. Yeah, exactly. Your reward is a nice cup of detox tea, a diuretic for the whole family.
Speaking as somebody who grew up with basically the family and the parents having a pretty tight lid on anything sweet in the house, the kind of craving it creates in a kid to want sweets forever and ever and more and more and more to when you withhold them is nothing compared. Is so much greater than you could ever imagine.
I am convinced that whatever you deny your children is what they're going to crave later in life.
Yeah, that's yes.
No homework or broccoli for you.
No, I mean, like, I have an obsession for comic books, and I think it stems from the fact that my mom wouldn't let me read them when I was a little kid because they were for older kids.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Then when
you're older, they tell you it's for younger kids.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, that 100%. But I think it's really interesting to see this sort of pushback against the fat Santa, considering the origins of our modern Santa, right? So, like, Santa was originally this tall, thin bishop dude it was like 200 years ago, 300 years ago, something like that.
Saint Nicholas.
Yeah.
The Finnish or the Dutch invented he wandered the streets at night and put treats in children's shoes that were left out in front of their house. What we think of as Santa today started kind of evolving out of poems written in the late 1800s, but really gelled from the Coca-Cola campaign, I believe, in the 1930s. Right?
Oh, yeah.
But the 1930s was coming out of the Depression, or in the Depression, right? So his fatness, his roundness was a symbol of food, a symbol of plenty, a symbol of enough, right? Which nobody had.
Yeah, of not being
during that time
deprived.
period.
Yeah,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that thing that it was literally designed. His body was designed to give comfort, right? And now we are rejecting that, or a large portion of our society is. Companies want icons that will cut through the noise, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so advertising something with Santa at Christmas time, no one's going to notice because everyone's doing it. That's why Coca-Cola went out of their way to invent their polar bears, right? The polar bears are now iconic of Coke. So when you see those, you immediately know what they're branding.
But see, even a few years ago, there was this whole anti-obesity campaign.
Oh, yeah.
With the polar bears and like the polar bears like getting diabetes and like being amputee polar bears. And like,
No.
They just show them all
I remember
happy and
that.
roly-poly. They don't show them having to amputate their feet because of diabetes afterwards.
polar
I
bears
think
can't
that's
even
a
drink Coke.
I actually think you draw an interesting line, Don, which is there's this sort of, I don't want to say it's innocuous, but I'll call it casual fat oppression of like, the skinny person next to you goes like, oh, I don't know if I should have diet Italian dressing or regular Italian dressing on my kale salad. I just, I feel so bloated. And you're like, shut the fuck up. And you want to, strangle them. That's sort of a casual, unintentional, like microaggression. But then to go out of your way to, show amputee polar bears because of diabetes, that is an active, you gotta have fat oppression on your daily agenda to get that shit done. Like that is an active act of war because you just can't tolerate fat people.
Or to besmirch the iconic symbol of childhood joy.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing's
I
good enough
can't
if you're
underscore that enough.
fat. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. If you're fat, nothing's good enough. And never
Leave
will.
Santa alone.
So, Michael, Dan, did either of you have a thing for Santa growing up?
No, because I was sort of the opposite kid of I really liked younger guys, even as a younger guy. And, I remember thinking when I was 21, like, oh my God, 30, who the hell would date a 30-year-old? That's so old. And, now being in my 50s and having interest from 20-year-olds, I'm like, wow, okay, this really works for me. I don't know what the hell they see in me, but it works for me.
Dan, was it hard for you to overcome your lisp at age 21?
It was.
I don't remember actually having anything specific for Santa when I was a kid. I don't remember ever that ever really being a thing. I mean, I think for me, there's a fine, like Santa, how he's represented can either be attractive to me or completely not attractive to me. There's a fine line there because it starts to veer toward the edge of what I'm into. And I more specifically like more into bear culture with like the big bushy beard and, a lot of people see Santa as a more dominant figure.
Is Santa
really,
top?
I
think the one thing we can agree on about Santa is that he's versatile.
Yes.
Any chimney, anytime.
I'm just saying a lot of people like him stuffed down their chimney. That's all I'm saying.
That's right. Any chimney, anytime.
Oof. I don't have any specific. He was not top of the list. I'll put it that way.
So, listeners, was Santa something that you found especially interesting? Write us in, let us know.
Yeah.
What's your relationship with Santa?
We'll answer your letters to Santa as Sexy Santa.
Yeah. Ho, ho, ho.
Oh, Trevor, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
In lieu of a tip or a bit, this
Or
week,
in combination of
yes,
tips
a
and
tip
bits.
bit.
A bit tip.
We're sharing some
Bit
of
of a
our
tip.
favorite holiday recipes.
Yes. And if nobody else wants to start, I will go first because I'm very excited about mine because it's very easy.
Mm-hmm.
This is the one. This is literally like, and by the way, and I'm just going to preface this from my own, and I'm sure it probably applies to the rest of you as well. This is supposed to taste good. I'm not talking about a fucking healthy recipe. This is a recipe that will make you go, wow, that's delicious.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start there.
Oh, you mean like it's food?
Yes, like food that you would want to put in your mouth and enjoy as an experience, preferably with other people around who can also enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
My mom has a recipe for Pearlie's chocolate silk pie,
Oh my.
which is the simplest thing to make. It's absolutely delicious. All you need is baker's chocolate, eggs, sugar, and a pie crust. And you can either make that yourself or get one at the store if you want. Like, it's the easiest thing in the world. Stand mixer. The trick is you have to make sure that your butter is room temperature, but not melting and not separating. It has to be room temperature, not cold, not hot. Besides that is mix it all together and make a delicious pie.
I'm just curious, is it a pastry crust or a graham cracker crust or an Oreo crust, or what's the crust here, Mark?
Traditional pie crust is what I would recommend. I mean, hell, if you can make a lard pie crust, that's even better.
It's a pastry crust.
Most people, most people don't opt for that. No,
Nice.
I prefer that crust because usually you get a little bit of saltiness in a traditional pie crust that you wouldn't get in something like a graham cracker. And I think the pie filling itself is so silky and sweet and delicious, and it's the star of the show. And so I don't want a bunch of like cinnamon graham flavors.
What was the type of the pie? What was the pie called again?
It's Pearlie's chocolate silk pie. A lot of people call it so here's the thing. A lot of people will say they have a chocolate silk pie, and then when you eat it, it's fucking mousse. And it's not a chocolate silk pie. And they're different. Mousse is perfectly fine. I don't have an objection to that on its own. It's just not the same. Chocolate silk pie is deliciously dense and silky and smooth. And it's a very different bite.
Like a very high-class pudding?
It's closer to fudge, honestly. If you wanted to equate it to something, it's like a step and a half away from fudge as far as density. It's more in that world.
So it's quite thick.
It's not fluffy at all, really. It's a fairly dense, silky, soft thing. And keep it refrigerated because it has raw eggs.
Fair enough. I'll follow that up with, I think I might have mentioned it around Thanksgiving when I made a couple batches and delivered it to people shut in. I love Indian pudding. Something we occasionally had when I was growing up. I have not seen it outside of New England, so I figured I would share it with people out here. It's basically a molasses cornmeal custard. It's the best way to describe it. That's baked at a low heat for a long period of time.
That sounds lovely.
The best way I can describe it, it's as though bread pudding and pumpkin pie had a love child, and he was sent off to study at Cornbread University.
Oh, I want to go there.
But it's the delicious sort of hot molasses corn custard that you serve with whipped cream or ice cream that you let melt into it as though it was a souffle.
Ooh.
And holy crap, is it good.
I think we might have to make that.
Yeah, that sounds delicious. Yeah. I have a feeling these are going to be mostly dessert themed.
Mine is actually not a dessert.
Trevor, what is yours?
So mine is, I haven't made this in a very long time, but it is, it's a recipe from Amy Sedaris's first book, I Like You, and it's called A Lil Smoky Cheese Ball. And there's been a couple of times where I've made these for Christmas. And basically, for those of you who aren't from the Midwest, a cheese ball is basically a big ball of cheese, but usually it's you shred cheese and mix it with cream cheese and butter. In this case, It's smoked Gouda, some cream cheese, some butter, a little milk to thin it out. Amy, the recipe calls for steak sauce. I use Worcestershire sauce because it kind of has that same umami depth to it. And then you kind of mix all of this together, form it into a ball, and roll it in chopped toasted nuts. I like to do the party nut mix just because I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of flavors going on, and it has Christmas party vibes. And you can make a giant ball with this. You can scale the recipe. So if I make the full recipe, I'll split it into like 4 baseball sized cheese balls. And that way you can give them out. If you're going to make just one for like, I don't know, yourself or for your family, I would have the recipe and it's still just going to be a very large ball of cheese. But it's really nice. It's good on crackers. Amy in the book, she says like, if you're having a couple of parties and people don't finish it, you can kind of like smush it back and then roll it in nuts again.
back into a ball again. I love that. Yeah. You can re-gift it. That's brilliant.
Oh my God. That reminds me of like one of my old guilty pleasures for Christmas that I have forgot about. I haven't had it in years. And I'm sort of embarrassed because port cheese, the port cheese balls.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Cheddar and
Port cheese
port. That's
dogs?
lovely. Yeah.
I really like that.
hmm That's great. My is a it's eggnog, and there's two things. I mean, you can just make eggnog, which is well, you could just go buy a quart of eggnog. But my innovation is most people have eggnog cold, and I find that if you go to the store and buy a really nice eggnog is often found in a glass container instead of a carton.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put in a respectable, not an expensive brandy or an expensive cognac, because come on, it's eggnog. But something that's decent, something that's not swill, something that's not $5 for a quart. And you heat the eggnog, even just on the microwave, and you put in some of your brandy, and it's really delicious. Just be careful, because eggnog is high fat, and when you heat like a really fatty drink, it's incredibly temperature sensitive. Like you can burn your mouth so badly. Like it could be the same temperature of coffee, but because it's hot fat, it's a different kind of burn.
It's a grease burn.
My other variation of this, a much classier version, is Alton Brown has what he calls aged eggnog. And it's really simple, except it's hard to make because you can't drink it right away because you have to age it. And it's 3 or 4 different liqueurs of brandy and bourbon and just wonderful mix. It's like I'd say maybe a third of this combination of alcohols, and then cream and milk. And you just put it in your refrigerator in July and let it age and age and age. He's serious about that. You can age it as long as you want. I think his longest is he's like been able to stay out of it is 3 months. That's the hard part. It's not drinking it, because you want to make it and then drink it. But I have some in the fridge, and we're going to open it on Christmas. It's been in there since about late October. And I'm really eager to try it. I'm going to try it cold. I want to try it hot. It's got just very basic, a little bit of nutmeg. I don't even remember if there's cinnamon, but like the main spice is nutmeg. But I'm very curious about this. And then just for the purists out there are some very ornate eggnog recipes that involve egg yolks, making a custard, folding in beaten egg whites. You can do all that. I'm just not sure you need to.
And for anyone who's looking for context here, having had some of Dan's eggnog before, he likes a good, strong, what was it you put in there? Bourbon? I
actually put in cognac, but a good healthy dose.
Yeah. So a nice pool of cognac and a splash of eggnog and be good to go.
Well, and warm it. I really do recommend warming it, which most people don't do with eggnog. You can. You usually don't do this with the egg white formulation, but it's delicious.
It's very good. Very good.
Where I grew up, we had this place called the Jonas Studios that made all of like the animals in mid-leap statues for the Natural History Museums. And they used to have a big Christmas party every year. And the centerpiece for the party was this enormous punch bowl that was like 4 feet across, filled with eggnog, spiked eggnog, that they would keep cold by dumping whole gallons of vanilla ice cream in over the course of the night. Though it was, they were ice cubes, right?
Oh my God.
Now, the kids in the town, we didn't know about the eggnog. We just knew there was big old blocks of ice cream in there, and we wanted that. So as soon as they left that eggnog unattended, we would raid that eggnog bowl, and you would have snockered children with ice cream headaches all over the party. It was amazing.
Oh my God.
Very fond memories.
Oh.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Santa's a bitch. He's a bitch.
Just imagining Tiny Tim is like, God bless you. God bless you.
Oh, you know what I try to say.
I love you guys.
You're all Santa. As far as I'm concerned, you're all Santa.
So I hope that some of these recipes we're sharing with you are going to help contribute to as good a holiday as any of us can have in 2020.
Yeah.
Seriously, wishing you joy, wishing you a bit of peace, wishing you a day of some tasty treats and some lovely times.
Yeah.
And let us know if you end up trying some of these recipes. I would love to hear what you guys think. So let us know.
You can tell us about your experiences with our recipes or your experiences with Santa.
You can also, we forgot to mention, we'll have the recipes posted on our page.
On our website.
You can find them for real.
Yes. We're on Twitter and Instagram as @BigFatGayPod. We're on Facebook as the Big Fat Gay Podcast. Leave us 5 stars there. Leave us 5 stars on Apple and Stitcher. If you want to see the recipes, they're at www.bigfatgaypod.com. Merry Christmas. I think that's the smoothest I have done that in a while. It's a Christmas gift to all of you.
For those at home, I didn't have to edit that one.
Maybe you're listening to this as you're scalding your mouth with some eggnog, and you get a little ding on Growler.
Ooh.
And it's Santa, and he's downstairs, so...
Look out, everybody.
And Merry Christmas.
Because Santa's a dumb top.
Merry Christmas.
I heard Santa's hung as hell.
Oh, dear
God.
Lord.
Okay, I'm ending recording, and I'm running to the bathroom.